If we look around the corner, September is not that far away, and now is the time that families are making final decisions on extracurricular activities such as music lessons. So who better to talk to today than the Manitoba Registered Music Teachers Association? I'd like to welcome Evangeline Keeley, the president of the MRMTA, and Anne Germani, their new vice president. Evangeline and Anne, it's so nice to have you here this morning over Zoom. So nice to meet you, Anne, and to see you again, Evangeline.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Anne, I'll start the interview with you. Can you first tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what instruments you play, and how long you've been with the Manitoba Registered Music Teachers Association?
Sure. I was born in England and I did high school in Newfoundland. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Prince Edward Island, where I studied piano, voice, and oboe, and played with the orchestra there. And then I did further studies at the Banff School of Fine Arts and piano performance and pedagogy. And then a couple of years teaching music in St. John's, Newfoundland, Labrador, Nova Scotia. Did a couple of advanced piano diplomas and taught at the university and the conservatory in Acadia University. And then came to Brandon to do a master's degree in piano and music education, and then sort of settled down until the early 90s. I moved with my husband and daughter to Iqaluit, to Nunavut, and couldn't take a piano with me, but I took a small Celtic harp and taught myself to play, and then really fell in love with the instrument, so that when I did move back to Brandon, I did some studies in the proper way to play from a great teacher in Winnipeg. And actually, Richard Turner, the principal harpist with the WSO. And then ended up playing with that orchestra as second harp for most of 21 seasons. And late 90s, I stopped my work with the university and the conservatory here and opened my own studio. It's in an old Bank of Montreal building in downtown Brandon. And I do a lot of private teaching, but I also do a lot of group teaching. Mostly because I find there's a lot of motivation in that, and it's a lot of fun to have ensembles of students playing together. So, and that's what I teach, mostly piano and harp, but the occasional instrument gets thrown in as well. Nice. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
So how did you decide that you wanted to become vice president of the Manitoba Registered Music Teachers Association? Did it take some nudging from Evangeline? Like, how did you make that decision?
Well, I met Evangeline really I've known you for a long time, Evangeline, but we got our heads together at the conference, the Canadian Federation of Music Teachers Association conference a couple of years ago. And she spoke a lot about wanting to know what other teachers and what musicians were doing around the province. And that's really important for us as teachers, to be able to see what's going on and to support our teaching amongst ourselves and our students. And with COVID, I all of a sudden really I had the time to do it. So I play the harp professionally, and I have gigs, but of course that all dried up. So what could I do that would kind of keep me in the loop? And so when I was approached to do this, I thought, sure, why not? And Zoom and the way we can communicate with one another, it's terrific. It doesn't matter where I live in Manitoba. Yeah. And I've got students within Manitoba, but outside of Manitoba. And it's terrific how we can keep our communities really strong and keep the music going. And of course, music is so much more important to everybody these days. Everybody needs music.
Mm-hmm. So yes, September is coming up and music lessons are going to be back in full swing. Evangelina, I'm going to pose a question to you this way. What are the advantages for a parent getting their students studying with a student who is registered with the MRMTA? Can you give us some of the advantages to that?
Sure. I think the main thing that I would start with is the fact that all members of the MRMTA have professional qualifications and pedagogy training in their discipline. So when a person applies, a teacher applies for membership in MRMTA, they do have to provide documentation to us of their studies, of their experience, of their teacher training. And to me, that's a big point for a parent in looking for a qualified and professional instructor for their child. So I would definitely start with that. And the MRMTA also provides other opportunities for students when they're studying with us, performances, scholarships, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so there are sort of two ways in my mind that students start studying an instrument. One, they really want to play an instrument. They say to their parents, I want to play cello, for example, or I really want to play violin. And then there's the other side of the coin where parents value the advantages to music education and developing brain and just developing another skill. Do either of you, what's the best way to pair up your child with a particular instrument? Anne, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, as soon as your child shows some interest in wanting to play, call up a teacher. Call up a teacher right away, and if you can arrange an interview to meet the child and the parent, and so that the parent has a chance to say, hey, this is my child. She learns this way or that way. What can you do for my child? Mm-hmm. And really get a sense. I mean, in the spring, I had a student who, a very young student who'd seen a picture of a harp at school, and, oh, Mom, I really want to play that. So the parent called me up, and so I had them in, and but by Zoom actually, and set them up with an instrument, and said, go away with this let's do 4 or 5 lessons and see how it goes. And so I had a chance to do all sorts of different activities so that she would be able to see, this is what it's like to take lessons. This is what it's like to play the instrument. This is what it's like to learn the vocabulary of music, and how and all the different fun activities we could do to do that. And so at the end of that 5 weeks, it was like, oh yeah, let's sign on the dotted line. Mm-hmm. So it's really, find a teacher and be prepared to ask them lots of questions. What can you offer?
Evangeline, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Well, I think one way that students can progress, like I'm thinking about the school music program sort of tying in with what we do. And I've had music teachers at a particular school, for example, the school that my son went to, that teacher would recommend students to me who were interested in piano, because that's what I teach. But when they get into the band level of programming, that's another extension perhaps of learning, and how the school teacher can then recommend, go to the MRMTA site and look for a teacher if you're wanting to dig deeper into that instrument. That would be another way as well.
Mm-hmm. This is a question I've always had. When I was 6, I started taking piano lessons, and it was great fun up until I was asked to put hands together. For me, I lost interest. I couldn't get it. I couldn't get the left hand to follow what the right hand was doing. Once you get a student taking music lessons, do you have any tricks to keep them motivated? Evangelina, maybe I'll start with you on that. Like, how do you keep them going and interested?
Your question is so very timely, Chris, because on October 3rd, we're actually having a workshop with a clinician from Calgary, Karen Geraldus, about student motivation. And she's done a lot of research into this particular field. And one of her, because I've heard her speak on this topic before, and one of her points is that children, or students, I should say, students need a peer group of kids that they know who are also taking lessons. And it doesn't even have to be the same instrument necessarily, but just so that they have that sort of peer group that they can come together and talk and say, I'm going to pick on your hands together thing there.
Yeah, yeah.
I can't get hands together. What did you do? And so they talk to each other, and that's one way that can really help.
Hmm. It's funny, as you're saying that, Evangeline, it's sort of what a music building is, right? I mean, universities, you get students standing around talking about best
Mhm.
ways to practice and, tricks. And do you have any ideas about that?
I bring all of my students together in small classes once a month. And so a way I start September off is to have a group of students all come, and we start the year off with a popular song. Last September, it happened to be Stand By Me. And so it doesn't matter what level they're playing at, or if they're doing one hand or two. And so one will play the bass line, another will play the rhythm and chords, another will do the melody. The most advanced student will start to improvise on that, or play, two or three parts at the same time. So that's really motivating. Because they're coming together. It's a fun occasion, and they can see what others are doing. They can visit with one another, and they've got that ensemble experience that, yeah, this is really fun, and it's cool to play your pop song that you're hearing all the time on the radio.
Right, right, right. Okay, so COVID is at the front of everybody's mind, and now there's been some easing of regulations in regards to music lessons and classroom learning, et cetera. What is the private teaching year going to look like in this upcoming 2021-2022 year? Evangeline, maybe I'll start with you. Do you know?
Well, if I had the complete answer to that, I'd probably be pretty rich and famous, but I don't. uh, you know, the MRMTA, it will continue to make recommendations to its members as far as following the provincial health guidelines. And they are recommendations. I know personally, I'm hoping that, I haven't confirmed yet, but I'm hoping that most of my students will come in person. However, I remain flexible, given last year's circumstances, that some may continue to learn at home or via Zoom, whichever, and that's fine. And as far as programming goes for MRMTA, our first 3 events we are doing exclusively online. So we have a discussion time the end of August that Anne is hosting on tips and tricks for your studio, to start up. We have our annual general meeting will be online, and we have our first workshop in October online. And after that, we are really hoping that things will be open enough that we can proceed in person. But if that's not the case, just like last year, we'll be ready to go online with our events.
And the website where people can go online for those events is
mrmta.org.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. It sounds just great. And I have to ask a question. What about singers? Have you heard from any voice teachers what they like, if they're going to be teaching in person, or what that's going to look like?
I have not at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And Anne, I understand that you've got a couple of favorite MRMTA programs. Can you tell us what those are and why they're your favorites?
I'm referring to some of the events that we do in Brandon and the Westman area. The one that we always look forward to is Canada Music Week. In the past, we've had recitals. We've often invited composers to come and talk about their music and to host the event. In the past, we've even had workshops in composing or in improvising for students. So that's always kind of a big event for us, is the Canada Music Week event, and I'm sure it's the same in Winnipeg too. It's well supported, and yeah, it's about Canadian music and Canadian composers, and getting our own students to think that way too.
And then what, do you have another program that you're fascinated with the MRMTA?
Yeah, and then the other thing, it has been the Zoom recitals that have been offered to more advanced students through piano, strings, and voice. And they were very successful last winter. So it'll be interesting to see how we go. If we can I see huge advantages in using Zoom as a platform. In fact, my studio is going to stay fully online into the next year. And so within that, it would be nice to have some hybrid. So every now and then I do get to see my students. And be a part of those master classes and recitals that are face to face. But still to stay with the Zoom as well, because what we can do online is pretty amazing, and it's making it very accessible for our students and our teachers.
Yeah, it's one of the things we're noticing here at the station is Zoom is coming as a handy tool for interviews and whatnot. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. Evangeline, once again, can you just give our listeners the email address for those interested in the MRMTA and some of the events that are coming up?
Yes, our website is mrmta.org, O-R-G. And the calendar of events is on, or will be very soon, on the website for this coming year, once we settle all details that we need to. And there will be updates there and photos and things of events as we can post them.
And for our Classic 107 listeners listening, I'll embed a direct link to the MRMTA's website, so you can find it there. Evangeline and Anne, it's just been a pleasure. Anne, it's been so great to meet you. And Evangeline, it's been great to see you again. Thanks again for chatting with me.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.